Facilities meeting to order and ask for a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting by John. Puts it on the floor, seconded by Ron. Any changes, corrections? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Ross, why don't we start with the airport? I think Jeff had called, but I didn't get the answer. He must be running late.
All right.
He is on his way, I do know that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First resolution request in your packet is for a seeker determination of no significant impact for the off-airport obstruction removal and miscellaneous improvements project, H346. The county's environmental consultant has completed the full environmental assessment form and is recommending a seeker determination of no significant adverse impacts for this project. On pages, on pages 3 and 4 of your packet is a copy of the Part 3 for the full environmental assessment form, the determination of significance. This project will result in the conversion of approximately 10.47 acres of existing upland forest cover type to brushland cover type. The brushland habitat is in decline in New York State due to its ephemeral nature. The majority of the tree clearing efforts, 10.45 acres, will be conducted at the runway 30 approach end to remove obstructions from the approach airspace to runway 30. On page 4 of your packet, you'll notice at the top, box A is checked. This project will result in no significant adverse impacts on the environment, and therefore an environmental impact statement need not be prepared. Accordingly, this negative declaration is issued. I also distributed copies of the full environmental assessment form, parts 1, 2, and 3 to the committee, and directed your attention to the federal documents that are on the county's website. The environmental assessment that was prepared by McFarland Johnson. The FAA has also issued a finding of no significant impact.
Okay, questions? Mark?
Mr. Chairman, Ross, where's Part 3?
Part 3 is on pages 3 and 4 of your packet.
3 and 4?
Yep.
This is Part 3 itself, okay.
Yes,
Part 3.
this is actually Part 3 of the full environmental assessment form.
All right, so when it says Part 3 provides the reasons, it's talking about the document.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank
Reasons
you.
supporting this determination.
Okay, Ron?
So other than informational, what we would do with this today is move this to the board. We would not issue a negative declaration.
No, the full board would, yes.
The lead agency would have to issue the negative dec, so our action today would be to move.
We have established lead agency, Warren County is lead agency.
Right, so,
Yep.
so if there were a motion, it would be to move this to the full board.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and a second by Evelyn. Any other questions? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
I'm going to abstain. I want to read this first before
Okay.
All right, continuing on, the next 4 resolution requests are all related. They're all part of the same effort. Page 5 of your packet is a resolution request to increase the capital project, H325. This is the navigation easement for runway 30. On page 6 of your packet is the resolution that authorized the grant application. We have received that grant. The typical funding distribution for this project will be 90% FAA at $1,008,000, with the New York State DOT and the county picking up 5% each at $56,000. On page 7 of your packet is a request for a new contract with CNS Engineers. This is for the engineering and legal services to purchase the land and easements in the runway 30 approach with the grant money that I just mentioned. And that contract amount will be $78,000. On page 8 is a request to establish a new capital project. This will be for the actual obstruction removals. This will be H364. This is for the runway 30 obstruction removals for that land that we are going to be purchasing. This is for design phase of the obstruction removal, $80,000 contract with CNS Engineers. On page 10 of your packet. Page 10 is the request for that contract, the engineering design services with CNS for that grant. for the $80,000. The CNS contract will be $75,300. That carries with it, again, the usual, cost distribution, the 90% federal, and 5% state and local. And that can be seen on the resolution request form, number 8, page 8 of your packet. The federal share is $72,000, New York State DOT $4,000, and the county share is $4,000. So essentially, try to summarize that for you real quick. We've applied for 2 grants. One is to buy the land off the approach end of runway 30. One is to design the tree removal in the land to runway 30. We're getting 2 contracts, one with CNS, to do the acquisition of the land, and 1 contract with CNS to design the obstruction removals in the approach to 30. So they're all related to the approach end of 30. Buying the land and, designing the tree removal for that area.
The 5, 7, 8, and 10,
Yes.
you've got here are all interconnected. Just been explained and are in our packet. Questions on those?
I guess I'm just curious, what designing tree removal, it seems like you just, forest that goes in the market and you cut it. I don't understand what the
Well, there's
big expenses
survey
for
work,
designing it.
there's mitigation, that'll be needed for the structures as well. We have to install 2 obstruction lights for the Cahill structure and the C-card structure. And then there's the environmental impacts, that have to be, incorporated into the design effort. There's landscaping that's got to be addressed for the Cahill property as part of the negotiation. So there is engineering services that are needed for the design of
This
the
is all off the
obstruction
east
removal.
end of the runway?
And this is all off of the east end of the
Right.
runway 30. Yep.
Anyone else? Rachel?
Just have a general question about some of these resolutions. And I noticed this at our last board meeting, and I'm just wondering if maybe I could have a little more clarification. On resolution, 206 as well as 204, I noticed that standard language is always that in a form approved by the county attorney without the need for further resolutions. And, what does that open us up to? What does that really mean? Because in our last board meeting, I realized that sometimes that means that the resolution we're approving is really significantly changed, and it doesn't have to come back to the board for any further resolutions to be clarified or passed.
On the town, we do that, and all the time. That's because there might be little wording changes, but no significant change. If it was a significant change, it would have to go back through the process again. What they're saying, if, the wasn't capitalized, and it should be, we can make those small changes. It doesn't have necessarily any impact on the bigger picture.
Because at our last,
Immaterial changes,
Right.
basically.
so there's supposed to be immaterial changes.
That's my understanding.
Is
Is
that
that
right?
correct?
Well, I mean, I think it's the job of the county attorney to make sure that notwithstanding what the resolution may or may not say, you have to make sure that what goes out is protective of the county and in compliance with law. So that's always been my position. If it's a substantial material change, that in my opinion is substantial material, I bring it back to the committee, or at least I give the committee an update at a later date as to what may have happened.
So for example, in these 2 resolutions, what would be an immaterial change?
What are the resolutions we're talking about?
206 and 204?
206 and 204 on page 9 and 10.
Yeah, 206 is the resolution that authorizes the submission of the grant application to the FAA and DOT for the runway 30N obstruction mitigation design of the PAPIs and the approach for 12 and 30 at the Floyd Bennett Memorial Airport. That resolution essentially authorized us to apply for the grant, but it also authorized the chairman to sign the grant once those documents were received. So, without having to come back to the committee and get authorization to sign the grant offer, we sign the application and the offer is approved under one resolution.
If you changed it from 80,000 to 100,000,
That would be different.
That would be different, yeah.
Okay, so any change in the dollar amount or any of the terms of the contract would have to come back to the committee?
I don't know that it's any terms of the contract. I think you have to Again, there are certain times when I think the county attorney may incorporate language with respect to termination, with respect to indemnification, with respect to insurance, that the county attorney may identify that are necessary. And it's my understanding that it's within the discretion and the authority of the county attorney to be making those types of changes.
I guess, I'm just gonna ask, until I have a chance, Martin, to meet with you a little bit more in this. With looking back, obviously today we have on our agenda a lot of discussions about Siemens and those contracts. And many of the issues, in my opinion, that we're seeing are these blanket, resolutions. I don't believe that they're all just minor changes. I believe some have been significant changes. So, I think for those resolutions, just so you know, at this point, I'm not comfortable in voting yes.
I'm sorry, what resolutions are we?
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
believe she's talking about 206 and 204.
206 and 204, the ones that have that specific language in them.
Yeah, that's pretty standard language.
Don't we have to pass these through?
The resolution's already been voted on, this is 205, we voted on that like back in the spring.
So the ones in front of us today, why are they in front of us if we're not voting on them?
Just FYI, those are
Just an
resolutions
FYI.
that have already passed.
Oh, these are already
Yeah.
passed.
Yeah.
And if you know of any resolutions like that have significant changes,
Well, I brought it up at the board
I'd like to
meeting
know
last
about
month,
that,
I was
but
concerned.
I don't know of any, but if
Yeah.
you know of some.
We can talk after, no problem.
Someone
I'll
else
pay more attention
have
to it.
a,
Thank
Mark,
you.
did you have your hand up?
I just had a comment. I think it's a good point that Supervisor Seaver raises, and it's something that maybe could be clarified in the future with some additional language that says something to the effect of, immaterial, changes, are what we're talking about here. Just for consideration.
And I just go on the record as saying that I'm incredibly opposed to limiting it in that way. Many times things crop up that are minor that the county attorney needs to adjust. We could get a contract that says we're supposed to originally be reporting quarterly and they might want it bi-monthly. I wouldn't want to try to limit exactly what insubstantial is. I'd prefer to leave that in the eyes of the county attorney.
Well, that's fine, we're not debating that today, I'm just simply stating if it's a minor change, I have no problem with it, but I want a clarification, and I'll meet with Martin to learn more about that language.
Okay, what is committee's pleasure? You wanna move 5, 7, 8, and 10, all those that Ross has explained together?
I'll move that together.
John has put it on the floor, and a second by Evelyn. Mark?
A discussion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I had met with Mr. Whitehead before the meeting, brought something to my attention. I'd like him to be able to share what he said to me with the committee, if
Okay.
that's all right.
My concern had to do with the purchase of the land at 1.12.
Could you just, I'm sorry, Travis, about my hearing, but it would help me a lot.
My concern had to do with the land purchase itself at $1.12 million, which I might note is at a considerable premium to the assessed value. And my concern is that if you enter into this purchase, that you be just as careful about the legal description of that land as you were when you discounted the idea of taking advantage of the abrogation easement that we already have on that land. That all went back to this map. I just want to bring it to the attention of the attorney when he does his due diligence on this, that there's at least one boundary, that is the boundary between the Chartrand property and the Cahill property. That was done as a deed that transferred in 2007, and it does reference that same missing map. So I can't see why the public would go ahead and pay $1.12 million for something that the county attorney has already said is defective and cannot be held. We cannot be use it as a point of law because the map is no longer there. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Fred?
Well, is there a new survey of that? There's a survey, so you have a surveyor's opinion of where that boundary is? I mean, a new survey.
It'll all be done part of this.
This all gets resolved, that resolves any issues, right?
It's been done? I'm not clear what you're saying. Been done or has
It will be
been
done as part of this project, as acquisition. We will send surveyors out there to do that work. We'll do an environmental due diligence audit on the property, make sure there's no contamination, survey new boundaries, survey any, subdivision that's necessary as well, so. That all good.
Mr. Chairman, and Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, but, we're buying land, is that correct?
Land and navigation easements.
But new ones, that'll be to our description, to our, satisfaction. We're not buying this old easement that Mr. Whitehead is
No.
referring to.
This will all supersede any previous easements or land boundaries.
Okay, thank you.
So, the land boundary is, on this property is now defined by the map. And I agree with you that probably you can work this out and get it changed. My question is why you couldn't have pursued that, on the navigation easement itself. We have map after map after map, that was based on that missing map, the map that was supposed to be held by the county, clerk, and has come up missing. I agree with you that it seems like it's a simple way of going ahead and say, well, it makes sense, these maps all show it in the same spot. We'll agree that it's on this spot and be done with it. That can be done. My question is why it wasn't done, when we wouldn't need to expend $1.12 million.
Any other questions? Ron?
Just, quickly, Russ, if you could quickly just go through the federal and requirements for property acquisition, the process, and those appraisals, just.
Yeah, there's a very extensive federal process for real property acquisitions. The county has to, obtain fair market value appraisals for the property. That's what we have to pay is, fair market value. The assessed value is not what you pay, that's something different, that's for tax purposes with the towns, that's not what the fair market value of the land is. That's what we have to pay, so that's why you may see a discrepancy between the assessed value and the fair market value appraisal, which is what we're obligated to pay under the real property acquisition laws, federal real property acquisition laws.
And it's also a best use value is what has to be paid, so there's,
Yeah, there's the highest and
and
best
it's-
use issue
so
as
it's
well.
not even about, what its current use is and what its value is its current use, you have to pay by best use. And so the process is very stringent, there's only certain appraisers that can even be involved with it, they have to be certified through DOT. There's review appraisals, and it's a quite formal process that, is undertaken, and, our hands are tied once we enter into that process.
Thank you. Mark?
Comment and then, a question. Comment is, I think Mr. Whitehead brings up an excellent point, which is why I'm gonna vote against these 4 resolutions. We should have done this when it was navigation easement discussion. Now we're gonna do it after we, offer $1.2 million to buy this property. Which leads me to, if this is now established as a fair market value for this property, question, how does this impact what is the latest discussions with Mr. Macri and the property that he, owns at the end of runway 1? Are we setting ourselves up to go, back to court with Mr. Macri to, discuss the value of that property and put us potentially in a position where we're gonna have to come up with a whole lot more money than was prior established, because we're now establishing property out there at a fair market value that's worth over $1 million. It's very alarming to me that this may turn out to, be a situation with Mr. Macri that works to our disadvantage.
Martin,
Any
address?
comments on that?
Go ahead, Martin.
Well, these are multiple parcels. With respect to Mr. Macri, the substantial area that is being acquired there is a navigation easement. There is a fee acquisition as well. He's been paid, on the principal amount already. He did reserve his rights to seek additional compensation. He's pursuing that. Actually, we're gonna talk about that down in item 16, I think, on your agenda. So I suppose, it's theoretical, what's gonna have to happen there is there's gonna have to be an appraisal that is going to have to be done at the vesting date, which was not the original date of the review that was done for the initial payment that was made to Mr. Macri. The vesting was done earlier this year, so you're gonna be hearing that, as part of the process here, the county is not only going to be retaining the services, needs to retain the services of Bob Height, to defend that proceeding, but will also need to get an additional appraisal, which will be done as of the vesting date. I can't give you that exact date, I think it was sometime earlier this year is when title vested with the county. That was all done by stipulation, and through the court. So, is it theoretically possible that the value of this land, that the value of Mr. Macri's land has gone up since the time of the original appraisal was done? I suppose it's theoretically possible. A lot of time has gone by. But whether or not these valuations impact that value is yet to be seen. I believe the same appraiser conducted the appraisals on these parcels as conducted the original appraisal on the Macri acquisition. I believe it was the Thurston, Ryan, Casale appraisal group. That's the same group that Mr. Height is proposing to use for the new appraisal that will need to be done as of the vesting date. So just to be sure, to be clear, you're not talking about a different appraisal process. You're not talking about different appraisals. The appraiser who appraised these lands, who came up with this aggregate value for these avigation easements and these fee acquisitions, is the same appraiser who valued the Macri acquisition, admittedly several years ago.
Thank you, Martin.
Doug?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a couple comments.
Thank you.
I can hear me. Just a couple comments. I think it's no secret that I'm opposed to this whole process with Runway 30 and the fact that we're gonna own 52 acres of land in Washington County, paying taxes in Washington County. I thought we should have pursued a different avenue, which was simply going after the easement rights legally, which would have been a heck of a lot less expensive. FAA money, state money, and our money. Now we're gonna spend over $1 million, and I'm totally opposed to that. But, and the second comment I wanted to make was, if Mr. Macri does sue us, which obviously he's going to, because we're taking his land through eminent domain, as we all know, and he says it's more valuable than what the appraisal came in at, and Martin, you're saying there's gonna be a new appraisal done, and if the new appraisal comes in at roughly the same amount, 300-something thousand, I think it was, and he says it's worth $1 million, and it goes to a judge, and the judge says, you know, it is worth $1 million, isn't the county on the hook for the other $700,000 up and above the FAA appraisal? Am I correct on that?
I'm going to have to defer to Ross and Jeff on that, but I believe there's a process involved. At least it's been discussed. I've been privy to the conversations. There's a process involved to apply to the FAA for those additional dollars. That's my understanding.
Yeah, the FAA has indicated to us on several occasions that they will accept a supplemental application for additional funds under the existing grant, up to 25% in addition to of the existing grant and supplemental funds. Anything over and above 25% higher than the existing grant will be the county's responsibility, unless we're able to convince the FAA to let us apply for a new grant to cover those costs. They haven't indicated that they'd be, willing to accept or deny a new grant application, but under the existing grant, we can seek 25% additional monies if there is an award greater than what the original appraisal was.
Okay, so if the original appraisal was 350,000, 25% of that is what, about 90,000, so they'd go up to 400-something thousand, and then if the award was 800,000 or 700,000, the county would be on the hook for the rest of it, unless you reapply to the FAA for a newer grant, which they may or may not say, hey, we'll do that. Is that correct? Is that a recap?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay, that makes me uneasy, just to let you know, because that puts us in a very, very questionable position with this whole process and in our financial position. And here we are trying to scrape money together for STEM and all these other great projects, and we could potentially be on the hook for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, yeah, I know we're not there yet. I hope we don't get there, but it looks like to me we're starting as usual down the path of another serious financial hit to the county. So I just want to make that known.
Okay.
I just want to say that I understand the concern, but to put your mind at rest, just simply is that hypothetical just doesn't happen that way, because the process is so stringent, and it's law. The federal, eminent domain procedural law is law that is illustrative to the judge in making his decision. And any appraiser could come in and say that that land is worth, or that easement is worth $1 million, but if they're not a federally approved, appraiser, and they don't follow the exact same process that our appraisers and review appraisers and the DOT appraisers took, it's irrelevant. So this is not abnormal to have, property owners in a disagreement and seek additional compensation. It's quite normal. It happens on our federal aid road projects and bridge projects. It happened quite a bit on our recent Corinth Road project, and all of the settlements come back very minor. The review appraisals and the submitted appraisals from the plaintiff's side, they have to follow the exact same rules and guidelines, and they really don't vary that much typically. So I want to put the committee's mind at ease that I wouldn't be surprised if there is an additional compensation to settle this out, that will likely be submitted back through FAA. It's not abnormal for that to occur, but you know, the notion that it would be some absurd amount, it just isn't going to happen with the process being so stringent, and the process is law. It's not something that a judge would just be able to just say, oh, here's another one, let's average the two and I'll make a settlement. They have to follow the exact same guidelines as our appraisers.
Fred, did you have something?
I guess two things. One is, when you talk about the 25% more, that's just for the Macri grant, it's not some amalgamation of all the grants.
No, it's for the most recent grant. It was $380,000 grant and change, so 25% of that grant amount.
Okay. And then the other thing on this question that we already have an easement to something, but there's a missing map, and as I recall, we've uncovered every stone looking for the map, and we haven't found it. But I guess the other question is it at all feasible to move in the direction of having a survey done and then asking a title insurance company to insure our existing easement based on physical monuments, adjoining surveys, lines of occupation, that type of thing? I mean, I think the answer is it's going to be up to the title company whether they're willing to do that or not, but is that a feasible path rather than paying this money?
Well, I think you still have to, the end game though is you still have to assert your rights to the easement, and I think that's uncertain as to, I still maintain it's uncertain whether or not that easement was procured because of the map, the missing map. So I think you can...
The only thing that would change is you'd have a title, I mean, you'd have a surveyor's opinion based on other evidence of what the easement is, and whether if a title insurance company would insure that, but they'd certainly be taking a risk if they did.
Correct. I think you still might have the concern with the underlying fee owner of the property as to whether or not we have rights to that easement. I'm not sure that the survey and the title search addresses that underlying concern.
And right at this particular time, we're not talking about the Macri piece for this juncture with these, what's on the motion that's on the floor right now.
Right.
This is runway 30, which that doesn't applicable.
That's what you're talking about, Fred. You're talking about runway 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about runway 30.
Jeff?
I'm just thinking of the discussion we had probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. There was quite a bit of discussion about the map, and as I recall, the new navigation easements and acquisitions are more restrictive than that prior navigation easement would have been anyway. So even if it did exist, the new ones that are overlaying that same area are to a lower plane. So I don't know how that would play into whether, you know, an old easement that the county maybe should have owned but didn't get filed, you know, was a plane like this, and the new one is somewhat lower based on new standards. So I don't know if materially that would have an impact on anything.
Gets you where you need to be.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, also, I believe the language in
Travis,
the...
please don't approach the podium until you're called upon. Thank you.
I believe the language in that old easement from the 1940s also referred to objects like a line of trees. It didn't refer to monuments in the ground that a surveyor could find. So sending, a surveyor out there to find markers that the easement used to describe the navigation easement from the 1940s, they don't exist anymore. We're talking about an easement that referred to a tree line, a rock wall, I believe. So I don't know how you're gonna be able to send someone out to identify that.
You know, most surveys are opinions anyways, based on the best evidence they can find.
Okay, Travis?
We do have a copy of the navigation easement, that's never been in doubt, and I don't have it in front of me, but I don't think there's any mention of a rock wall or tree line or anything else in there, and there definitely, and I take exception with what Mr. Tennyson was trying to say, there's definitely nothing in there about, any heights or whatever that you might be able to trim these things. It says you can take down any tree or a tree, cable or cables, building or buildings. There's, it's wide open on what you can do. And there's absolutely no doubt that that is the navigation easement that we're talking about. The only doubt in there is that navigation easement does refer to a map that's supposedly held by the Warren County clerk, and no one can find that map. So that's the area of disagreement. It's in the 2007 deed, and this will be of what you're going to be purchasing here that defines the line. Within that deed, the language in that deed between Mr. Chartrand and Mr. Cahill says you are not allowed to remove any trees on this land that I so give to you, except if the only reason that these trees can be removed is if the county exercises their rights to take them down. And that's in the 2007 deed. That refers specifically to the rights of the county to remove trees in that area. 2007 deed says that.
John?
I don't know what happened to the navigation easement that was done in the 1940s. Evidently it was done wrong, but you're giving us assurance that this navigation easement is going to be done correctly. Okay.
Yes, and that's the point at hand today with the guidelines that are fixed by FAA and the procedures that we have followed to date with the cooperation of the landowners that have been involved. Simplicity would say that if we just got easements, that would be the easiest and cheapest route, but that is not what the landowners wanted. So we went through an appraisal process, we went through finding out how much the value was, submitting grants, etc. to FAA. This will accomplish what we need to do to become compliant with the FAA, as is going on all through the country, and some airports are deficient in moving forward. We are doing quite well with working with the landowners around our properties, etc., except for Mr. Macri's provision. The other ends of the runways, we've been very successful and are doing well with what we have to do for navigation easements. That brings us to the point at hand today and what we have in front of us. We have a motion on the floor for those 5, 7, 8, and 10. We have a second. I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No.
So moved. Okay, Ross?
Okay, moving on, page 11 and 13 of your packet go together. Page 11 is a resolution request to amend an existing grant. This grant resolution was authorized by Resolution 204 of 2015. That authorized the submission of a grant application to the FAA and DOT for Phase 3 of the environmental assessment for the Runway 1 extension project. You can see from page 12 of your packet the resolution that's already passed. The grant application was authorized at $600,000. The FAA did not have that amount of money available for funding. We negotiated with the FAA and our consultants to reduce the scope of work. We obtained a new independent fee estimate for that reduced scope of work, and the FAA has awarded us a grant for a total of $315,000 with a federal share of $283,500. The, state and local match for that will be $15,750. That there's explained on form number 6, page 11 of your packet. On page 13 of your packet is what we'll do is increase the capital project. So, on page 13, what we're doing is we're increasing, based on the grant that we received, H303, the runway 1 environmental assessment, for $285,000. The federal, share of that increase is $283,500. The state share, as was indicated previously, is $15,750. The, local share has already been funded and raised. You'll see on page 14 of your packet, earlier this year, we had increased this capital project by $30,000 to do that time-sensitive task, that wetland survey work that we needed to do in the summertime. So we had already increased it by $30,000. Therefore, since the grant that was received is less than what we had applied for, we're actually going to return $14,250 back to the general fund. Are there any questions on that?
No, it's okay, sure.
So you're looking for move 11 and 13?
That is correct, yes. We'll be amending the grant to reduce the total grant amount. The grant, we applied for $600,000, and the amount that we're looking for, that we've received is $315,000.
Okay. Questions? Fred?
Yeah, so this is for a phase 3 environmental assessment?
Yes, it is.
What exactly do they do in a I know phase 1 and phase 2, but I don't remember what 3 is.
Well, phase 3 is a continuation. This effort is needed because we're moving the glide slope antenna over to the other side of the runway to avoid impacting the, that Marl Fen that we've been discussing. So, because we're making significant changes to the environmental assessment by moving the antenna location and the impacts, environmental impacts, due to that, there's additional effort needed for the environmental assessment. Part of this grant includes some modeling by the FAA Air Traffic Organization, some antenna modeling, so there's $50,000 that's been allocated for that effort as well, that antenna relocation, to make sure that it will work on the other side of the runway. And then, we had to reduce the scope of work. What we took out of the original grant application is the, state permitting and Army Corps of Engineer permitting efforts and the associated, engineering services that are needed for that. So this will only accomplish the federal environmental process. The FONSI is what we're looking for. That's what we're aiming for. It may require additional work, but we don't know until we finish the environmental assessment.
Mark?
So, you're taking out the state piece of this?
That's correct.
Okay. What happens to that? Doesn't it still have to be done?
That will still have to be done. That will have to be accomplished during the design phase of the runway extension.
So you'll be just coming back later?
Yes, it'll have to be put into a design phase.
Okay, and then that will be submitted to the FAA as a separate piece?
That's correct. So yeah, this will only accomplish the federal environmental process, the federal EA.
Well, I assume when they review the grant, it's spelled out that the state piece needs to be done too.
Yes, the FAA is fully aware that the state piece needs to be accomplished, yes.
So what was their explanation for taking it down?
They didn't have enough funding available to fund
Oh, it's a
all
funding
the,
issue.
it was a funding issue, yes.
So they just said, just take it out and
Yes.
pay for it later?
Complete the federal process and you can tackle the, state, permitting process in the
All right.
design phase.
Got it, thanks.
Okay. Can we get a motion on the floor? Ron, second. Fred? More discussion? Travis?
Thank you, Dan. In regards to this, I just look at this as, throwing good money, after bad. We continue to go ahead and discuss whether or not there's, a need to, extend that runway. Recently, the Marl Fen has been declared a critical environmental area by the town, which is only going to make things more difficult probably to get this thing through. The designers are talking about moving antennas to areas that they wouldn't particularly, that were not their first choice. It's my understanding actually that anytime you have a plane taxiing over there or anything else, you're supposed to contact New York Control to tell them that, you know, there are people, there is something there that could be interfering with the antenna, and therefore people using that approach should be aware of it, because this is not a controlled field either. There's just a lot of issues with this. A lot of the issues have been discussed. The public is getting to be pretty aware of the whole thing, and while I absolutely recognize that there is no need to take this to a referendum to the voters, to the taxpayers, to see what their opinion is, there's also no reason why you couldn't, and you could have a non-binding referendum even. But my sense is that there are very few people outside of this room that are in favor of this extension. And I think it would behoove you to get a better sense of what your constituents' opinions are before you throw, you know, more money after the money you've already spent. That's just my opinion, and I thank you for giving me the time to express it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you. Page 15 of your packet is a resolution request for a new contract. This will be with CNS companies, and this is for that Phase 3 environmental assessment. The contract with CNS will be for $225,000. Again, the usual federal share at 90%, and the state and local at 5%. But this will establish the contract with the engineers to perform the work.
Okay, so number 15, can we get that on the floor? Evelyn, seconded by John. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Okay, on page 16 of your packet is a resolution request for a new contract with Height and Beaumont, PC, attorneys at law. This is for professional specialized legal services for defending the county against an EDPL claim by Forest Enterprises. As we've been discussing earlier today, this is the acquisition of the 4.13 acres of land in fee simple from Mr. Macri and the abrogation easement over the remaining parcel. Mr. Macri has submitted a claim for additional damages, and this will provide us with the necessary contracts to defend the county.
Martin, you want to add to that?
Just a couple of things. We have utilized Mr. Height on any number of occasions. We've used him in connection with this very matter. It's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that he was involved in the Corinth Road process. And other projects as well. I do have a copy of his proposal, which he submitted to me on October 28th. The claim was actually, the Article 5 claim was actually filed and served by Mr. Macri through his attorney, Pat Shealy. It needed to be answered, it needed to be responded to. And I had discussions with Mr. Height about responding and preparing that answer in his capacity. He did so. And so he's actually already performing services because the services needed to be performed. So we have an outstanding invoice from him for some services as we speak. This proposal would cover those services and would cover any ongoing services that may be necessary. I'm recommending the proposal as county attorney. I think Mr. Height has done extraordinary work for the county, and I have every reason to believe he will continue to do so. He has also provided a fee proposal from the appraiser, Thurston Casale and Ryan. That arrived this morning. That arrived last night. It's a proposal dated November 25, 2015. He is recommending Thurston Casale and Ryan for the vested date appraisal. It is a self-contained report, so I would like the resolution to include the authority for Mr. Height to retain Thurston, Casali, and Ryan on behalf of the county for an appraisal report, should it become necessary. The fee for that is listed at $5,000, and any court preparation and testimony is listed at $150 per hour plus expenses. I should also point out for the record that Mr. Height's proposal is for $225 per hour, as stated in the resolution request, but as typical with these types of proposals, there are additional miscellaneous costs for travel, photocopying, reproduction costs, extraordinary postage, trial transcript costs, which he would bill at cost to the county.
Okay, can we get a motion on the floor inclusive of the appraisal report for $5,000 and other contingencies? By Ron, seconded by Fred. Discussion. Fred?
I mean, shouldn't we include some not to exceed amount, or leave it totally empty, open-ended?
For Mr. Height?
Yeah.
You can certainly do that. If you'd feel more comfortable doing that, you can do that. I have no idea at this point whether in fact Mr. Macri, through his attorneys, in order to not waive any statute of limitations periods, filed a claim. Whether or not they pursue that claim, I think, remains to be seen. So you may need these services, you may not need these services. And should you need these services, as I've indicated, I think Bob Height is the right guy to provide these services for the county. So, you know, I think if you want to put a not to exceed without further approval of the county, I'm sure that Mr. Height would be comfortable with that, and you can pick a number. You know, but at $225 an hour, you know, it's not a long time if you get involved in some, you know, complex, protracted matters. It's not too long before you're up to $5,000 or $10,000. Just be mindful of that.
Anybody want to put a number on it, Rachel?
I don't wanna put a number on it, I had a question, but I'll wait. I mean, I do wanna put a number on it, but I have no idea what.
Maybe Fred could help us get a number in mind.
I have no idea what it is.
Well, why don't I
It
just
just seemed to me that
why don't I just
totally open-ended, it'd be good to have some.
why don't I recommend $10,000?
Okay, that's fine with that. I would,
Okay.
move to amend the motion to include that,
Um,
without further authorization.
Did 10,000, that would be inclusive of the 5,000?
No, it can't be inclusive of,
Appraiser
it's gotta
report?
be, we know what the appraisal fees are going to be.
10,000 for him plus the 5,000 for the appraiser.
So not to exceed 15,000 with
Well, wait, because I think you have to be mindful of the fact that if the tangible appraisal is $5,000, so the court-ready appraisal is $5,000. If the appraisal firm is called upon to prepare for trial or to testify at trial, as I indicated, their fee is $150 per hour. I think I indicated for court preparation and testimony. So here's my sense of this, is that if you are, I'd like to recommend that you approve that 5,000 with the 150. But be mindful, if you get to that point, if you're getting to a trial point, you're going to be hearing, I assume that Jeff and Ross are going to be bringing Mr. Height in here to talk about the trial, to talk about the issues that are before the court, to talk about the strengths, the weaknesses of the case as the case may be. And you can revisit the fee at that issue. Just remember to do that. And I think by putting a $10,000 cap on Mr. Height's fees at this point in time, without further approval of the board, if there is litigation here, I think it pretty much guarantees that he's going to be back here. Okay. That's my recommendation. Okay.
Just for clarity, we're gonna, cap Mr. Height at $10,000, approve, the 5,000 for the appraisal if it becomes necessary, the additional $150 an hour if there's preparation, and the minor miscellaneous expenses, including postage or whatnot. That's essentially the substance of this motion, correct?
And here's why, Supervisor. It's unlikely but possible that Mr. Height doesn't get to the $10,000 line before he's calling upon his appraiser to come in and help him prepare for trial. And I want him to have the flexibility to be able to call upon that appraiser to be able to come in and help him prepare for trial. It's theoretically possible that that scenario exists.
Right, that's what my understanding was as well, but I wanted to make sure we were clear exactly what we were putting forth today, so I'm fine with that if that's the motion.
Okay, the only thing I'm a little vague on is the $150 an hour that the appraiser would cost. And do we cap that, or how does that get handled?
I'm not recommending that be capped at this point.
So that's okay, open-ended with that, John?
But this would be all moot if Mr. Macri doesn't go further with this.
That's
I mean-
absolutely correct. This is the what-if scenario.
So why don't we wait until he files action,
Well, he did file an action to
I mean, beyond that.
preserve his rights.
the initial action?
I don't, he did file his complaint, his claim to preserve his rights. That claim has been answered, and we owe Mr. Height, for his services in that regard. I think that, my expectation is that you're not going to have a lot of services by Mr. Height in the near future unless Mr. Macri pushes this forward. I would like to see, as your county attorney, I would like to see this agreement in place with Mr. Height so that you have it. I mean, we can ask him for an expectation over the course of the next 6 months. What services, if any, is he going to be needing? Is he going to commission the appraiser to get the appraisal started? My sense is that that is only going to happen if someone asks for a court conference with the court to set appraisal dates, et cetera. To my knowledge, that hasn't happened.
Okay, and second question, thank you, Frank. When we're talking about not to exceed without further approval $10,000, that includes his hourly fee and associated costs, right?
You can make it, yeah, you can make it that way.
Travel expenses and everything else, or?
He's not gonna have a lot of these expenses.
No,
He's
but
just
I'm
not.
just
But
so that
that's fair.
it's clear.
That's fair, sure.
Kinda going to a comment Martin made about the flexibility, and my understanding is the arrangement that would be that the appraising firm would be a sub to, Bob Height, and he would only call on their services as necessary and then bill for it, basically pass through their bills to us.
That's correct. I want the privity of that contract to be between Mr. Height and the appraiser, on behalf of Warren County. That's correct.
From a management standpoint, we've got 10,000 for, Bob Height, we've got 5,000 for the appraiser, plus any incidental costs. I think it would be easier for Ross and I to manage the expenses by doing an aggregate, so that if Bob's, expenses are a little low, but the appraiser has to do something additional and it's $5,500, instead we have the flexibility. So I'd recommend the committee do an aggregate, total not to exceed of 20,000. It would cover the services of Bob Height, their appraisal sub, and any of their hourly times. The only other question I would have would be the existing bill. Does the existing bill come out of that, or would we be authorizing the existing bill in that amount plus the additional?
It's gonna come out of that. It's gonna come out of the money we authorized today.
Okay.
What are you proposing?
So instead of passing a resolution that says 10,000 to Bob Height, 5,000 to Thurston, and then all these, set the rates, but then give an aggregate, that way we have the flexibility depending on how things go. It doesn't really change the overall cost, other than it could save us some issues. If, like I said, if we're saying the appraisal's 5,000, but then they've gotta do a return visit and they charge us $5,500, I'm back for another resolution. Whereas if we do it in an aggregate, then I think it's more typical of how Ross can manage it. And we could do the not to exceed of, 18,000, 20,000, I think is probably 20,000 would be safe with some incidental copying and transcripts.
Ross, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, to let the committee know that we, indicated our reserve account as the funding source for these expenses, and we do have, in excess of 20,000 in that account.
We have I think it's close to 40.
I
And
think so, yeah.
the other thing that would have to be part of this motion would be to, transfer money from that into a contracts account, or I guess the project account, right? We would transfer it into the H project and expense it out of the project.
Well, I indicated that the funds would come right out of the reserve. I don't know, do we need to transfer the money? I would be a question for the treasurer's office.
Normally, or the resolution could authorize transfers incidental to accessing the funds. Normally, we have to pull money out of a reserve into an operational expense code. So if we can just keep that open, we'll figure that out with the treasurer's office between now and finance.
It's getting a little convoluted here. Rachel, do you have something pertaining
Always
to?
convoluted.
Well, the motion on the floor, we have to clarify once again, and the
Oh.
committee's gotta
Okay.
chime in as far as,
Regarding funding, I mean, you're talking about where to get the funding from. All I wanna know is if you're able to submit to the grant fund once any of those are expended to the cost.
Yeah, these expenses we will seek reimbursement as a supplemental to the existing grant, yes.
Okay, so that doesn't, it can come out of your reserve, but then subsequently be.
Yes, at the project closeout is when we would seek that supplemental. We have to wait until then before we.
Chairman? Ross, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you and I had a discussion about that some time ago, and you sent me some guidelines for, grant, items that could be covered under the grant.
That's correct.
And it's these types of expenses that can be applied for.
That is correct.
As part of the grant process. So it is theoretically possible that these expenses could be recovered through the grant at the close of the project. So you will have to expend them, right? And then seek recovery or reimbursement of them through the grant process.
That's correct.
But it's just to be clear, it's my understanding that these are identified, not for certain, but these are identified as the types of costs that are allowable for reimbursement under the grant, correct?
Correct, 100%.
Ron?
Amanda, the original motion was made by,
let's see, yourself and Mr. Monroe.
I'll withdraw that
I'll
one
withdraw the original motion to clear the path for a new motion.
and make a new motion based on what, Jeff recommended, 20,000.
John, go ahead.
All right, just to be clear, in the new motion that we're talking about professional services, and leave it general like that, we're talking legal and maybe further assessment in regards to the Forest Enterprises contesting of their appraisal, that professional services fees and associated costs not to exceed an aggregate amount of $20,000 without further approval.
Okay, is that acceptable to committee? Can we get a second on that? John, you gonna move that?
Yeah, I'll move that.
And second? By Fred? Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So
I'm gonna abstain.
You're on 17?
Okay, page 17 of your packet. This is a miscellaneous resolution request, to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Skimmerhorn Aviation and ESMI. Those are our two, main tenants out at the airport. And the intent of the MOU is to provide for the, cost sharing, of the natural gas main sections that benefit each of the customers at the airport for the installation costs that we've been, billed by National Grid. Both, Mr. Skimmerhorn and, ESMI partners have agreed to reimburse the county for the costs billed by National Grid for the gas main. On page 18 of your packet, I've put together a table that outlines what these costs are. I'd just like to draw your attention to the, section highlighted in the, black box. The total cost for the gas main installation services to the county will be $23,891.75. Those invoices from National Grid have been received. On page 19 of your packet is another table that illustrates, individual buildings, the length of distance for those gas mains and what those costs are. Again, this will be a cost share, so there will be a reimbursement from, and that's what the MOU will provide, is a mechanism for Skimmerhorn and ESMI to reimburse the county for outlaying those natural gas main costs. I based that information on what you'll see, this map I prepared on page 20 of your packet. What I did is I put in a color-coded map here that shows how we're breaking up those costs. The ESMI hangar is the larger hangar all the way off to the left. You'll see there's a pink line extending from the yellow gas main. So I measured the distance of the yellow gas main all the way over to that building. All three of us, the county, Skimmerhorn Aviation, ESMI, are all benefiting from that length of gas main. So the cost distribution would be a three-way equal split for those costs. There is a green 2-inch main extension from the end of that yellow line. It goes as a diagonal across the ramp parking area by that cluster of hangars. That's a green 2-inch main extension, and that main extension will service county buildings and the new restaurant. So for that main extension, I proposed a two-way split between the county and Rich Air or Skimmerhorn Aviation for the cost of that 2-inch main extension. There are some service lines that will be for each of the individual buildings that will branch off of that 2-inch gas main, that green line that's drawn through there, and each owner of each building will be responsible for those service lines. Over to the right, you'll see the gas main, the 6-inch gas main has actually changed its color to orange and goes up towards the 4 corporate hangars. That orange gas main is a 6-inch gas main, and that one has benefits both Skimmerhorn Aviation and the county, and I'm proposing a two-way split for those costs as well. To the right, you'll see a blue 2-inch gas main extending between the corporate hangars. That's will be solely the responsibility of Skimmerhorn Aviation to pay for the cost of that 2-inch gas main extension. And then at the very end of the orange 6-inch gas main, you'll see the service lines branching out to the airport firehouse, our electrical service building, and the terminal building. And those service lines costs will be the responsibility of the county. Page 21 of your packet is the resolution that authorized establishing the capital project. We established this project at $35,000. This morning I was talking with the DPW fiscal manager, and she had indicated that through consultation with the county treasurer's office that I do need to increase this project by $8,000 to cover those costs until we can get reimbursed. So I do need to increase that. I have identified that I've been squirreling money away in our supplies code. So I've got money in our 410 supplies. What I'd like to do is increase the project by $8,000, and the funding source would be our 410 supplies code in our operating budget.
Motion to get that on the floor. Evelyn, second. Fred, discussion. Hearing none, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
That's all I have.
That's all you have? Travis, you had something?
I did, thank you. I wanted to just talk, when we were discussing item 16, but actually, you were backed into approving some sort of money for that. At any rate, what I really wanted to say was, when you think about it, this dispute with Mr. Macri and all of that land, if that runway is not extended, there is absolutely no need for abrogation easements over any of that land, except for that 4-acre little spot that you're buying. You would need abrogation easements over that at some point in time, once those trees start growing back up. They're not a problem at this point in time. As a Queensbury taxpayer, and seeing the argument of Mr. Macri that he felt that land could have been developed as an industrial park or other uses, such as the Kmart that he had, sold the adjoining land to the Kmart for over $1 million, which I think is a large part of his, reason why he thinks that he should be due more money. But at any rate, he says with those restrictive abrogation easements, that land is unsuitable for any development. If we do not extend the runway, it is suitable for development. It could be on the tax rolls for the town of Queensbury. It will not be on the tax rolls if it's not developed. So again, I think you should be considering this going forward, as far as just whether that extension really has value to your constituents or not. Thank you.
Okay, can we revisit 16? We need some clarification, and maybe, as far as, you wanted to come out of a reserve fund, or?
Jeff was saying that they're gonna take the money from the airport reserve, so we can just get, approval for the treasurer to appropriate funds from the reserve as necessary. That was not
Okay, for 16, if we can get approval for the treasurer to take it from the airport reserve, that would, make it easier clerically,
I agree to the amendment.
okay? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. That's all you have?
That's all.
I think you're up, Frank.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item I have is actually two resolutions. We put a bid out for septic cleaning, which will become effective in January, and we're actually splitting the bid. The low bidder did not respond on 3 items, so we're gonna award those to the next bidder. So the bulk of the contract will go to Blue Diamond Septic, and then there's 3 items that will go to Stone Industries. So there's 2 resolutions for that contract.
Okay, motion to get them on the floor. John, seconded by Evelyn. Discussion? Yeah.
Just a question, so
Ron?
you're saying that the apparent low bidder, failed to submit a complete bid?
Right.
Is that the gist of it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
The bid was worded, so that we could have multiple awards.
I see.
They didn't bid on the porta potties throughout the county.
I see.
and-
So they're non-responsive on those elements?
Right.
I see, okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
If we could, Mr. Chairman, we'll jump to number 5, update on the court renovation project.
Okay. Yep.
Just wanted to give the committee an update. We received bids on the temporary court space renovations, yesterday. Those have been authorized through board resolution already. 2 of the 3 contractors we are, awarding to are ones that are already on contract with the county. So we think that we can, issue those new contracts quickly and get them on board. And then, a 3rd new contractor, who we've used in the past, Our Electric, was the apparent low bidder for the electric work. So be happy to give a look down in the temporary court space if anyone wants to see it. But we're hopeful that we can, with the help of these contracts, as well as our own crews, complete the work and be substantially complete in early January and ready for use of the court space. There may be some ancillary work that would be done in off hours or when allowed to really complete the project and all the finishing touches. But we think based on the bids that we've gotten and the fact that 2 of these contractors already have insurance with the county and we can execute contracts quickly, we'll be back on track here very quickly in the next week or 2.
Any questions?
On the bigger court project, Clark Patterson has not only been working with us on the temporary court space, but also advancing the design for phases 1 and 2, which is the expansion to the north of the building. I anticipate by mid-January, we'll be ready to give the committee an update with probably a 50% design and kind of review some of the bigger decisions to be made. So that work is ongoing, and once we get to a point where we have something substantial enough to bring back to committee and review and give you guys an update, that'll likely happen in mid to late January.
Okay. Did you wanna go over the referrals?
Yeah, I think we can remove some of these. On page 2 are referrals. I think the solar power is a dead issue for now, so I think we can remove that one.
We need to do a formal rejection of all bids. We have not done that.
For solar?
I'm really happy.
Okay.
We did that would be the last step in that. If the committee is comfortable with how we've approached the electric usage with the recent Constellation contract, then our way to close that out would be to reject all bids on that solar RFP.
Is that the committee's purview to reject all solar bids at this point in time?
Is there
And
a
motion by Evelyn, second by Mark. Any other discussion? Call the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item 2 is the walkway in the front of the building. I believe Clark Patterson has that in their scope of work now for, towards the end of the project, so I think we can remove that from referrals. They'll be doing design work on that, and I don't think it needs to be on here anymore. The public safety building, I also believe, has been referred to finance. I think that's where that stands.
That work is underway. Clark Patterson, the money was authorized to OES. Clark Patterson generated a letter of authorization detailing the scope, and that's been executed, and that work is underway. So I think the next step in that project will be for Brian LaFleur to come back to his committee once they complete their estimate. So I don't think it needs to be on facility referral anymore.
Item 4, we haven't done any more on since it came to us. I don't know what the committee's pleasure is on that. Make the campus a smoke-free campus.
We had a lengthy discussion, went out to, seeing this is the last facility meeting of the year, and then, we'll be starting up probably with new members. Why don't we keep it on and address it, the makeup of next year?
Okay. And then the last item is, the energy savings contracts. I don't know if we're ready to have discussion on that, or...
Yeah, I just wanted to do, there was one other thing. Rachel had a good point, and she wanted some clarification. It was on the fob system and usage, and I could also use it too. Can you be point specific, like you were with me about, your questions as to the usage in the doors that are activated and how we're approaching, because it has changed over the course of time.
Right, I had asked Dan yesterday about, what the status was with the fob keys. I know after we were all given them, I was under the impression that we were then going to have that front door locked and really just be utilizing the DMV entrance. Dan and I were both a little confused over what the protocol was gonna be following the issue, being issued fob keys, but I was also in the building a few Friday nights ago and, had to use my fob key to come in, but I was surprised to learn that maintenance was unaware, and maybe it was just miscommunication, but I was wondering if they had also been notified about the fob process and that we were all given the keys, because they seemed very unfamiliar with what those were and who had them. So I was just wondering what the status is in terms of locking that front door and really going to that next level that we discussed.
The sign shop in Warrensburg is currently working on new signage for the entire loop around the campus. As soon as we get them up, then I think we can implement our fob system.
Are there certain doors that are already active and have been active?
They're all active, they're not, the system is not activated yet. In other words, if the door is locked, your fob will work on it, and maintenance is aware of that. Maintenance has been issued fobs. Not everyone on the maintenance crew, though, will have a fob, so,
Was it the night crew?
Yeah.
Was it late, so maybe we just touch base with our foreman on the night crew, make sure they're all aware?
Make sure they know that if someone has a fob, it will work and let you into the building.
Just so they know who has them, but I just wondered when we'd move to that next step, so you think soon?
Signs will be going up beginning this Friday and through next week, so I would say within a couple of weeks, implement the whole thing.
Great.
Then what is the actual protocol? Can you explain what doors, and how?
It'll be public.
Refresh our memories?
Yeah, public entrance will be only at the DMV entrance in the building. There'll be employee parking out back and then out front also, so employees' fobs will work on any door. It's just a matter of, we would like them to park in specified areas. So, but if you happen to be over at the HSB building parked and you wanna come in the motor vehicle entrance, for example, it will work. but public will be only on the DMV entrance, and our signage will indicate that. The other entrances will be I shouldn't say that's the only entrance, the other entrances will be magnetometer entrances for the courts and for probation. So there will be parking designated for court and probation areas, but they'll have to come through the screening to get into the secure area of the court.
Alright. Okay, does everybody got any other questions or good with that? Jeff?
I just wanna add that we've gone through kind of a deliberate process. It has taken longer than anticipated, but that final step really is the signage that, we brought through committee here a couple times, with some revisions. And then got, frankly, into the end of our construction season, and I couldn't pull the sign crew off all of their other duties at, towards the end of the construction season. So, construction season is essentially over, and, you may see guys out, marking locations this week and placing, some of the below grade portions of the side posts, and then, as the signs are made, we'll be laying those out, but we can't really implement the locked doors until we clarify the signage, so we don't have, the public getting frustrated at locked doors, so that's our goal.
Okay. Any other questions on the fob system or the security that will be moving forward after the signage? Okay. The Siemens Energy contract, in point of, Travis's work and bringing it to some of the supervisors, and specifically Supervisor Westcott had a list of questions he emailed and would like to bring up at the meeting, and I think it would be appropriate for you to start off the discussion and as you see it, and then we're gonna have Martin chime in and Paul, and we'll see if we can't get to resolve the issue and do some diligence with it and see what we can come up with.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you, and appreciate, your leadership on this to bring this to the committee today. You had committed that in the last committee meeting at the board meetings. Thank you for the opportunity. The questions that I'm distributing, shouldn't be, a surprise to anybody. They were captured in the email that I sent out that Amanda forwarded to all the supervisors. I just summarized them in a, shorter version, and I'll pass these out. Amanda made copies today. Appreciate that, Amanda. And, it's up to, you, Mr. Chairman, on how much you want to get involved in this. There's some for you, Paul and Martin. I've got a few extras here. Anybody wants them? I did go through Travis's work thoroughly. I spent, I don't know how many hours doing that. And so these were the questions that came out of it in my mind that, I think are, pretty streamlined here. So they shouldn't be, a major challenge to answer. We went on a tour, Frank, thank you very much. You and John took us on a tour of the system. And, I guess the first thing I found out was that the geothermal's not even running in the winter time to provide the heat. We've gone to our backup boiler, to do that. So that was the first thing I found out that surprised me. I had heard comments from county employees that they were cold, and I always thought it was the geothermal that was running, that wasn't producing enough heat. And what I found out is it wasn't even running in the winter. It's cold because these windows aren't well insulated, and this is a stone building, a brick building, and the windowsills allow the cool air in, and so, but we're running on the backup boilers. And the thermostat setbacks that were established up front as part of this program just didn't work. Frank came in, and if you applied those setbacks, it took till noon to heat the building up. So we went right off of those from the start. And the boiler, for some reason, that was installed, was less efficient per the terms of the contract. So,
Mark?
Those are the general comments leading into the questions, and then I have specific questions, and I don't know how you want to handle it, Mr. Chairman.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but Frank raised his hand, and I didn't know if you wanted to continue and not be interrupted.
No, I'm sorry.
Or if it's okay that Frank ask a question, or...
I would just like to clarify the setback, issue. We do still have thermostat setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
At nighttime, we go down to 55 degrees, and on weekends we go to 55 degrees. What didn't work was, originally we were supposed to set the thermostats at 68 degrees, which made, you know, at the thermostat level, the building would be 68. Down on the floor, it might be 40. So that part of it didn't work, but we are realizing, or we still do have night setbacks. What we did last year, because we had an exceptionally cold winter, is we had Siemens program into our automation program. If we drop below 10 degrees, then the night setbacks go away. Because what we were finding is the building can't recover in the morning between 6 o'clock when the would kick on and 8 o'clock when people would start business. So that's the only aspect of the night setback, and you know, I may have confused you with that part of it.
Right. That's why we're here today, Frank, is to clarify those things. It may not get everything right, but that's an excellent clarification.
That's good. I think if you go through all your points, Mark, they're well taken, then we can chime in and see how we wanna go about finding the answers and getting some clarity and moving forward with it.
Perfect, I appreciate that. So number one, the geothermal system meeting expectations, what do we think at this stage? I'd just like to get Paul and Frank's point of view on it. We haven't heard from you, on generally, you know, how is the system working?
The system works. I don't believe it was ever intended to work in the wintertime. I think it became an engineering issue where they said that it wouldn't work in the wintertime. So basically what the geothermal well field did is replace our aging and cooling tower that was gonna fail at any point, and that's kind of what started, one of the things that started this whole project. So on the cooling side, the geothermal does work. We're borderline sometimes when we get really hot days in sequence. I know Siemens at one time talked about putting a chiller on the well field just to help out with the cooling, but we haven't done that yet. So it does hold its own. Sometimes, like I say, when you get real hot weather, it'll be borderline. Our delta T going to the field is not that great. We're pumping, for instance, we're pumping 90-degree water into the building and 103-degree water out of the building. And that should be lower. Well, I shouldn't say that. It'll operate at that temperature, but it would be better if we could lower that temperature coming in. But as far as the heat side goes, I don't believe it was ever intended to work with the system we have. The question was always, are the triads backup or are they supplemental heat? And we've found that they've become supplemental heat. We need those triads to add heat to our loop when it's real cold out.
When you say triads, you're talking about
Those
the
are
three boilers?
The old boilers,
Mhm.
yeah.
John?
I just, you know, I have a schedule, and I allocate a certain amount of reasonable time to each thing. But are we planning today to go through point, you know, concern, response to concern? How do we address the concern? Are we doing that today?
Well, I wanted to go
I can
down,
easily see this
I wanted to
going
go
on
down to 10 concerns that Mark had. I
Uh.
really don't, I don't feel as comfortable with answering, putting Frank and just answering on the narrative, because I don't think it's gonna resonate until we get a comprehensive addressing of all the particulars, because Frank certainly isn't responsible for a lot of things. He can comment on them, but I don't know if the comment is site-specific to what we're actually looking for.
and
And there's also some economy here that we're looking at.
And I certainly respect Travis's White's efforts in identifying issues that need to be addressed, but I'm just, you know, it appears to me at this point we're going to do that today. I'm gonna have to excuse myself anyways, but I certainly want to be part of this process, but I can't. I have an 11 o'clock appointment, I've got 5 minutes to get to the town.
As chairman, what I'm gonna do is have Mark go through down his 10 points. I think that'll give us some directives. We're gonna have the attorney chime in and the county administrator. We're gonna have Jeff chime in as the,
Okay.
DPW engineer.
Well, then
And
I'll-
then I'd like to hear from the committee as map out a plan that if they think there are questions that need to be answered, to be brought back and try to satisfy some of our concerns. And if there are issues with performance, et cetera, if we proceed it further. Evelyn?
I'm gonna have to support John on this. DPW was supposed to start at 10:30. If this was gonna be there, we should have budgeted a little bit more time for facilities. It seems to me the same supervisors who complain that they don't get stuff far enough advance love to show up at these meetings with these long lists that we're now suddenly gonna take 10 hours to cipher through. Half the stuff on this list, I know we've done at previous committee meetings, because I've sat through them. I have other stuff I have to do today as well. It's not fair to Jeff, it's not fair to all the rest of the supervisors to sit. I came prepared to hear from our attorney and have the report on the information we asked for at the last meeting, not to sit through the 10 bullet points that have just been handed out. I think we need to strive for a little consistency here. If these same people who are gonna complain, they don't want things just handed to them, don't want that done to them, we don't want it done to us either. And if it was not put on the agenda, it's obviously not on the agenda, I think it ought to be held for next month.
Okay, Mark?
I didn't do that. I sent these questions in yesterday as a follow-up to my email from last week, and I looked for the direction from the chairman on how to handle it.
Well, the chairman can handle it any way he likes,
That's
but
right.
I'm with John, and I hope there's a quorum for your DPW committee, because I will be exiting in 3 minutes.
Well, I just want to set the record straight, Evelyn. I mean, we don't
I'm all for setting the record straight, Mark.
we don't have to cover this today.
Excellent.
I'm going at the lead of the chairman, who is the one who suggested that we do. And I also ran it by Chairman Garrity, who said it would be a good idea to bring it up today. So if the committee wants to table it, that's a committee decision.
I would like to address these.
Ron, you had something?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we should, I think this is a good thing, and I commend Mark for putting it in writing.
Thank you.
And, because I think that's what needs to happen here. And I would add to this, the one question that Supervisor McDevitt brought up, that he had some questions regarding NYSERDA involvement, and that his reading of some of the material indicated that there was gonna be a role for NYSERDA. And, was there? If not, why not? That question should be added. But I think all the supervisors that have questions, should submit the questions in writing so that staff can properly organize them. Some of them, like we started to hear today, and I think they should be responded to in writing, but some of them might be low-hanging fruit. We heard some of the response today about, the operation of the system. Some of them, may take more time. There may be files that have to be pulled, there may be boxes of storage that have to be pulled. So what I would recommend is that we assemble all the questions in an efficient way, and then, it'll give staff a chance to go through them all, prepare their responses, at some time they can distribute their responses as to exactly, what the record shows, what their thoughts are.
Okay, Fred, you have anything?
No, I just agree with that. I think the responses should be in writing, so you guys have to.
Okay, Rachel, you have a purview on?
Well, I have 5 questions myself. I have no problem submitting those in writing and waiting for a written response, but I would also like an opportunity to schedule significant time where we all know, like, that's maybe even a special committee meeting where we can discuss that, because I think that dialogue is really important. We owe that to each other.
Okay, Mark?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My response was to the committee's agreement that we would talk about this subject at this meeting. I submitted my point of view 2 weeks ago, Evelyn, to you and the rest of the supervisors. The summary of the questions was nothing more than summarizing what I submitted prior, as an outline for today, to be handled as you so choose as chairman, as the committee so deems. I'm okay with the direction the Supervisor Conover has just stated. I agree, everybody has questions. Let's get them all in. Let's answer them responsibly. I'm okay with an initial response in writing to my email. I would take that. But in the meantime, get everybody else's questions too. Schedule a bigger meeting that Rachel suggested, and let's get in a room and figure this one out.
Martin, would you comment on this?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. think that I like the idea of, having the responses in writing. And I think, looking at the questions, I think some of the questions are gonna be easier, as Supervisor Conover indicated, some of the questions are gonna be easier to obtain the information than others. I think some of the questions, may be able to be answered by Jeff Tennyson and his staff. I think some of those questions may not be able to be answered by Jeff Tennyson and his staff. I think some of the questions may be able to be answered by the county administrator. I think some of them may not be able to be answered by the county administrator. My view of this, and I like Supervisor Sieber's idea of a dialogue meeting. I think that, you need to get this right. You take the time to get it right. You uncover those files, you pull the boxes out of storage if that's what needs to be done. It may be that some of the responses to your questions can be rendered sooner than others. So you may want to consider that there may be an opportunity within the month of December to respond to some of these questions. Some of these questions may not be responded to during the month of December. As far as the legal review, you have the obvious with me. After December 31, I'm not going to be here. So the question is, what about the legal review? When are you ready to conduct the legal review? I did review over the weekend. I did review comprehensively the municipal center contract. I hadn't done that in a long time. I was able to do that. But the fact of the matter is that, let's be realistic about this, is that you're probably going to have someone else reviewing that contract from a legal perspective, and advising you as to specifically item number 10. Whether that's me as the county attorney, whether that's your future county attorney, or a law firm that reviews that, I think all of that has to be considered. My view of this is that there may come a time when Jeff says to you, we don't have the expertise to give you that answer. We need to consider going to an outside source to consider putting together a response to that question, and to other comprehensive questions, and to any other questions that the supervisors may have. So in my view, I think your plan is to see what Jeff and his crew can respond to during the month of December. Get your other questions to Jeff. Maybe there's here we are, December 1st, maybe the supervisors can be given a date today or when their questions should be submitted, and submit them to all the supervisors, including Jeff, including county administrator, including the county attorney, and that way we can figure out who is going to be responding to what, give you an expectation as to what questions can be answered during the month of December, set up a meeting, whether it's in December or January, to continue to review these matters.
And Paul, you want to add on?
No, I think that's a straightforward approach. If there, I think we need the time to do the review correctly, and of course, if there is any issues, then they'll be addressed. I don't think that this is an overly involved situation in the sense of what is the right thing to do. I think we all know if there's a problem, like you have at home or anyplace else, you address it. But we don't even know if we have a problem at this point. I think we need to review this and see what the issues are and whether or not there is some sort of a problem with the contract.
Mr. Chairman, you have something?
Yeah, no, I applaud Mark for putting this in writing, and I'm glad he got these questions out. There are some easy ones to answer, there may be some more complicated ones to answer. But I appreciate finally, we're getting stuff in, and I would ask Peter to do the same thing, submit his questions in writing to the committee, and let's get the comprehensive list. And, I would like to see, these questions answered sooner rather than later. I mean, if it's an easy thing, answer the questions, send an email out to all the supervisors on the ones you can answer. If there's ones that are more complicated, state that. But I wouldn't dance around the issue. I mean, if there's something that Frank can answer quickly, then do a written response. But I would try to get the questions in by Friday, have everybody get your questions in by this Friday, and then certainly next week, by the middle of the week, you ought to be able to answer the majority of these. I would think they're not, and then when they get complicated, then the response are complicated. You're gonna have to get outside help.
That sounds reasonable.
I'm sure Mr. Whitehead has a lot of information that he'd be willing
willing to share and has shared with, Frank or whoever needs to look at it. So, I mean, it's not complicated, maybe we can knock this off. It probably will be January, March, before we.
That's all right. Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think,
Okay, in a sense, we're 35 minutes late, and Peter's got a question.
Just a quick observation, and maybe a question. It is my understanding that NYSERDA offers services to participate in energy efficiency studies, where they will fund half of the study. They have a list of approved engineering, environmental organizations that can help in that regard. I would just throw that on the table. We're ultimately gonna arrive at a point where we're not gonna be able to answer some questions that are on that list. So an independent third party with professional credentials, may ultimately be a good decision for all.
Martin, you want?
Yeah, thank you, thanks Supervisor McDevitt for bringing that up. I actually reached out to NYSERDA yesterday, went on their website. They do have a list of consultants. From my review, it became clear that if you're going to seek their assistance, the key to seeking their assistance and to seeing if there is, if a review qualifies for their aid, my terminology, their financial aid, my terminology again, that you have to come up with a scope of services. You have to really define what it is that you want them to look at. And then they review the scope of services, the selected consultant reviews the scope of services, everybody agrees on the scope of services, and then you go forward. So I think as you're answering these questions, you're going to have a better idea as to whether or not A, they are a resource that you can use, and B, if so, what would the scope of services be? So I'm aware of that. I've begun my look into that and have information about it.
Okay, I'd like to get closed up, so Mark, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, then, can we get an email out to all the supervisors that questions are due in by Friday?
Okay.
Amanda, and then, to your point, Martin, maybe Amy should be put on this to keep the continuity going beyond, the end of the year.
Okay. I can talk to her about it.
Amy's retiring?
Yeah.
Oh, she is? Oh, okay, didn't know that.
Rachel, you had something?
I just wanna clarify the dates then, based on Chairman Garrity's information. If we then, as supervisors, all put our questions in by the 4th, I have a couple questions. Who should that go to? Send them to?
The question should go to our administrator.
To Paul. And then, if a collection of all the questions will be put together, can that complete document be sent out to all supervisors on Monday?
Okay.
And then Chairman Garrity suggested by Wednesday the 10th, that the questions that could be answered would be answered by both the administrator, the county attorney, and by Frank and Jeff. Is that reasonable?
Chairman, I really don't think that's a reasonable time structure because, could we answer one? Certainly. But that's not gonna be, you don't want this piecemeal to you. I think I'd rather have enough time to answer a good chunk of the questions. But what's gonna have to happen is that Jeff's gonna have to go back and look at his files, Martin's gonna have to go back and look at his files, I have to go back and start reading, I have started reading some of the minutes and some of the, information, but I haven't gone back to the county attorney's files yet. That's gonna take some time, and we do have other things in the county that need to be accomplished during this same time period. So, my thought is that a more realistic, time frame, in which to, look to have a response to at least a number of the questions would be the following week. So at least then that gives staff enough time to start getting into things, because we do have other things in the county that need to be attended to on a regular basis, and this is going to be an extra project for everybody concerned. So my recommendation is at least give us, not next week, but into the following week to have some of the questions answered. Following that time, we should have a better idea as to what, if we can get them all answered, we do it. But if we can't, we should have a better idea as to when you can expect further information on this.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Paul. I think we're off to a good start. We have Supervisor Westcott's 10 questions. I understand Supervisor Sieber has 5 questions or so that are gonna come in. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we have Supervisor McDevitt's request about NYSERDA in an email format already. Is that correct? My recollection is, am I wrong about that? I have some vague recollection of that. I can check my emails, but I think so. So we can consider that a question as well at this point in time.
Okay.
Okay. Ron?
Yeah,
And it-
Mr. Chairman, and, you know, I understand the desire to, move forward quickly. I'd like to get this behind us quickly too. However, you know, I wanna be fair to staff. Like, for example, Frank, stated that his recollection was that, if I heard you correctly, that the geothermal system, was never intended, at least his thinking on it, that it was never intended to, provide, totally provide heat in the winter. That's his recollection, but as you go back into it, and that's why you have to go back, because now you gotta go back to look at the initial proposal to see, you know, in other words, you know, part of this too is to be fair to staff in terms of their, in terms of their response, and, because, you know, for example, Frank might look at something, somebody says, oh yeah, I forgot about that, or, you know, we're talking some years back now, so. I just bring that up as one example.
Just in the interest of time, in closing, I think we have 10 questions, Rachel has 5, we're gonna have other supervisors, and I think the questions are gonna perpetuate other questions, so it's not a document that's gonna be answered and finished. I think there's gonna be other things that come up that we're gonna need to clarify. So we will attempt to get the wheels of motion started, and, Mr. Chairman?
You know, okay, so the 10th is not a realistic date, we'll make it the 17th, but try to get as many of the questions answered by the 17th, unless you're on vacation, right?
No, I'm done vacation.
To do that, please. I think sooner the better, and then the other ones, you know, you can do that. I'm sure we got staff and people, let's just try to get this moving along.
Okay, and I'd like to open it up. Travis, do you have any to the public before I close the meeting? But I have a DPW, and could you just keep it?
I agree with everything we've said here in the last couple of minutes, in particular that this is gonna be probably an iterative process, that, you know, you're gonna answer one question, which is gonna beg another. And just for that reason, I think, to think that if we postpone it to a later date, that we can have all the answers, and you're just gonna be postponing the iteration. So I would be more in favor of, yeah, what can you do by next Wednesday? And leave it at that, and then knowing that that's not gonna be the end of it, and then maybe, you know, schedule another one, but, it's gonna take more than, you know, a meeting on the 17th.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
resolve all the issues.
And I think we've identified that, but we'll keep it moving and we'll see what comes out of it.
Great.
We have a good basis point here.
I'd be
Start.
glad to talk to, Mr. Tennyson or anybody on the staff, share anything I've got, you know, feel free, you know.
Okay. Anyone else have any other comments? Rachel?
Just to be clear then, by Wednesday the 17th, we'll have a written document with the questions that can be answered collectively, at Paul's request to have it be the 17th. And then the more complicated ones, could we just put a time frame on that? Like, we'll meet in January as a facilities committee. I think it's reasonable to say the more complicated questions, I mean, a lot of this isn't new.
I'm having trouble with it because already I've heard about, we want NYSERDA involved, and if they get involved, what does it do to us answering questions
Right.
when you have experts come?
Update in
So in other words, I don't wanna do that. I wanna keep it open-ended. I wanna have as much participation as possible. I think that's gonna have the advent of new questions and new territory we need to look at or whatever. And then there's gonna be satisfaction of comfort. The majority might get a comfort level and say, I'm fine with it. And it might die on the vine. It might propagate even bigger, and we might look further and deeper into it.
All I'm asking is could we have a status update in January, which will be the next time.
Okay, yeah.
That's it.
And I think that's fair, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, having none, could I have a motion to adjourn? Ron, second by Fred, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, so, sorry about the DPW.